Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. A couple of weeks ago, I was catching up with a friend and she was telling me how much of an awful month she had. What happened was basically she woke up one day and her back was hurting so much she couldn't move. What ended up being discomfort, what was discomfort at first ended up being a 3 weeks period where she was basically handicapped. She was not able to move her body because her back was hurting too much. And when she did some digging, she realized that part of the reason why she had that injury was because she was sitting down too much for work. I feel like that's a pretty familiar story. This is something that I hear a lot from my friends, from people at the gym. And I think what's most interesting for me is that it used to be the case that people that were a little bit older were complaining about back issues, but I'm below 30 years old, I'm 25 years old, and a lot of my friends are already complaining about back issues. So what is happening is that it's no longer just an older people's issue, it is a global issue. A lot of people are having problems related to their back, their neck. And when I'm having conversation with young people, I am surprised by the amount of people that really do not know the negative impacts of sitting down. So I thought it would be interesting to come in here, do some digging, and share of some of the results that I found with you. I am terrified of sitting. I'm always the type of person at work who will stand up. I try to work as much as possible because I think it's important, but I'm realizing that not a lot of people know the danger of sittings. So I want to share this with you, and hopefully we can start something, a little bit of a revolution, and we can change our habits and take our health into our hands. The first point that I do want to address is define health. We talk about health as the absence of disease. We say, oh, I'm healthy, I'm not sick. But the World Health Organization defines health as three-dimensional. So health is defined as physical health, so whether or not we have a disease, how we're feeling in our body; social health, whether or not we're interacting with people, we have a social life that is full, that is fulfilling; and then third dimension is mental health. How is our brain? Do we have anxiety? Do we have depression? Are we feeling healthy within our brain? So I think that's very interesting because health is shifting from that one dimensional concept of whether or not I have a disease to that three-dimensional concept about physical, mental, and social health. And that's very interesting because that is an important framework that we can use to analyze the effect of sitting down, and try to see what effect sitting down has on our mental health, on our physical health, and on our social health. What do we know about what sitting does to our body? This is super interesting to me. In North America alone, about 70% of workers sit most of the day, and a lot of people complain about back problems. About 70% to 80% complain about back problems, neck problems. So my friend was not an outlier, she was just the norm. So sitting, we know that sitting is very often associated with physical pain around the back and the neck area. But if we look at the science, what does sitting do? So it's very frightening. What sitting does is basically when we sit down for a long period of time, we basically tell our body, you can relax, you can go into hibernation. So a lot of its functions, the regular cleaning up functions of our body, are kind of sleeping because we're not moving, we're just sitting down at a chair. And so then the organism, the molecule that processes fat within our body specifically, goes into sleep when we're not sitting. There's a 90% drop in its activity level, so we're not processing fat when we're sitting. So this is not a back problem because since our body is not processing fat, what it causes is a rise in blood sugar, a rise in fat in our body, which with time, over time, translate into cardiovascular diseases as well as diabetes. And there are studies that show that people who spend most of their time sitting are at a 16% higher risk of dying from all cause, and then at a 34% higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. So what that tells you is that it's not just about neck, it's not just about our back. It's a whole full body issue when we're spending all of our day sitting, because we're sending a message to our body that you can go into hibernation. You do not have to do your regular processes to keep us healthy. And that's a big problem. Another problem that I do want to talk about is the effect that it has on our glutes. As someone that works out a lot, at some point I had glutes issue, I had hip issue. My hip was really painful. I had trouble sitting down. My hip was just killing me. And I went to the physiotherapist, and she basically told me it's because your glute is not activated. And part of the reason why your glute is weak is because we spend a lot of time sitting down as a species, and because of that we're not engaging our glute muscles that much, and it translates over time into hip pain. And I think that's just wild, because this is a conversation that I'm having with people also at the gym that are dealing with that same issue. And I want to make a whole other video on glutes, but that's telling you all of the impact that sitting down for long periods of time has in our bodies. And I think it's very important to take that in consideration, because people tend to think, oh, I don't sit down that much. But in reality, if you think about it, we sit down for work. A lot of the time we sit down for entertainment, we sit down for dinner with our friends. So if you compound that, a lot of Americans are spending on average 9, 10 hours sitting down, and these are having catastrophic consequences on our long-term health. So that is what sitting does to our physical body. Basically puts everything, it puts us in this state of sleep, and it prevents our body from functioning properly. So let's talk about what sitting does to our mind. So if you remember our framework on how we define health, three dimensions. So let's talk about our brain. Science defines two ways of sitting. You have passive sitting, and then you have like mentally active sitting. So active sitting would be when you're sitting at your desk doing work, so you're being active. And then sitting down passively is when you're basically sitting down watching TV or scrolling online. So these are two ways of sitting down, but they have different effects. Specifically, passive sitting was associated with a higher depression risk, with people that were sitting down, for example, to watch TV for long periods. They had a 17% higher risk of suffering from depression. And then on the contrary, when you look at active sitting, people that are sitting actively for work, we do see negative effect through the decrease of blood flow. So if you've probably experienced that, where you're sitting at your desk to get some work done, but after like 3 hours your brain starts feeling foggy, you're just tired, you can't process anything. That's because you're getting less blood to your brain, because you're not moving, you're sitting down at a chair. So sitting has effect on our brain, it has effect on our mind and how we relate to other people, and it's associated with negative impact on our mind, because it's associated to depression and a rise of in depression, for example. So it does have negative impact, not just on our physical body but also on our mind. So let's talk about what sitting does to your social life. The science is not that clear on this one. There's a lot of evidence that show that people that are more socially isolated tend to sit down more. But we're not sure, is it correlation, is it causation, what is causing what? Is the fact that we're sitting so much causing us to be more isolated, or is it the fact that we're more isolated that causes us to sit down more? We're not sure yet. The jury is still out on this one. But what I do know from my own personal experience is that there's a lot of social building and community building that happens when you're out there getting some movement in, and you're not just spending time sitting down. There's been this whole shift I'm seeing on social media as a culture that is saying we should do life with our friends rather than just catch up on live with our friends. And I've seen that in my personal life. I've had so much fun whenever I'm having actual activities with my friend, whether we're going at a golf range, whether we're trying out a new sport. It's always a way to connect. Whenever you're in a team, group. Let's say you're playing basketball, you're playing volleyball, you have that team spirit, you're working together, you're winning together. It truly shifts your relationship with people. It connects, it creates bonds, and it helps you feel like you're part of a community, you're part of a group, and you're able to move forward as a unit. You're able to create bonds. You're failing together. Sometimes you're crying together. I used to be a dancer and do shows, and one of the best feeling ever is prepping. Rehearsals are so hard, but they're so rewarding. You create so many bonds with people. It's just a fantastic experience. So that's telling you that when we're sitting down so much, we're and most of the time going through those passive way of entertaining ourselves, we're missing on opportunities to go on a walk with friends, to connect with them through movement. And it has so many benefits on us from a social standpoint. It allows us to deepen some of the bonds that we have with other people, and actually interact with the people around us, interact with the environment around us. And it's truly such a beneficial tool that we can use. So that's what sitting does to our social health. Now let's talk about working out, because a lot of some of you might be like, you know what, that's all good and great. I understand sitting is not good for my mental health. It's not the best for my social health, and it's not the best for my physical health. But I work out. I work out every day after work. I work out. I'm an avid worker. I'm an avid gym goer. I go to the gym. I play with my friends. I'm all good. It's very important to understand what active couch potato is, because it is a term, it is a real scientific term. And what it means is that we're noticing that a lot of people that are active, that are doing sport, are also dealing with the negative effects of sitting down, because they spend a lot of time sitting. And when you spend on average 9 hours, 10 hours sitting down, you actually need 2 hours of gym time to counteract the negative effects of you sitting down. So if you tell me that you're working out 3 hours during the weekend, it's not enough to offset the negative impacts of sitting down. The best way to offset the negative impacts of sitting down is through integrating regular movement throughout the day. And that's what this channel is all about. I want to teach you how to move in a way that is fun, and how to integrate movement in your day-to-day life. And one of my favorite things to do, and that's why I'm very careful about the words that I use on this channel, is that I differentiate between movement and working out. Movement is a practice, is something that we should be doing daily, multiple times a day. Sports, working out, is something else. This is something that we do for fun. This is something that we do for maintenance. We should be lifting heavy. And this is something that we do for our own enjoyment, right? I do aerial hoops, I do calisthenics for my own enjoyment. I don't necessarily have to do that to live a longer life. What we do have to do, every single one of us, is to move throughout the day, is to have movement throughout the day. If you are wondering how many movement breaks should I be taking depending on how many hours I sit at a chair every day, I have a movement calculator linked in the description down below. So please check it out. It'll tell you based on how many hours you sit down, how many movement breaks you should be taking. If you do have tips on how you get more movement throughout the day, please comment them. And let me know, were any of these stats surprising? Did you already know about some of the negative impacts of sitting down? I was very surprised when I read some of the stats, and hopefully share this with your friends, with your family, so that we can all be educated on the effects of sitting down at a chair, and we can create a community where people are aware and people are having more movement within the day. If you're curious about some tips on how to do that, there's probably a video that will appear somewhere in the screen. And that's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.